3 hours later, they didn't know much more, except that nothing they tried to do to keep the vampires from leaving seemed to work. Apart from tranquilizing them and locking them up in sturdy cells. Tracking those who did leave wasn't much good either. Claire and Hannah ended up at the glass house, which seemed like the best place to gather, central to most things, and close to City Hall in an emergency. Rich and Morell arrived, along with a few others, and set up shop in their kitchen. Claire was trying to figure out what to do to feed everybody, when there was another knock at the door. It was Grandma Day, the old woman, straight-backed and proud, leant on her cane and stared at Claire from age-faded eyes. "I ain't staying with my daughter," she said. "I don't want any part of that." Claire quickly moved aside to let her in, and the old lady shuffled inside. As Claire locked the door behind her, she asked, "How did you get here?" "Walked," Grandma said. "I know how to use my feet just fine. Nobody bothered me." Nobody would dare, Claire thought. "Young Mr. Richard, are you in here?" "Mom?" Richard Morell came out of the kitchen, looking very much younger than Claire had ever seen him. Grandma Day had that effect on people. "What are you doing here?" "My fool daughter's off her head," Grandma said. "I'm not having any of it. Move out of my way, boy. I'm making you some lunch." And she tapped her cane right past him into the kitchen, and clucked and fretted over the state of the kitchen while Claire stood by, caught between giggles and horror. She was just a pair of hands getting ordered around, but at the end of it there was a plate full of sandwiches and a big jug of iced tea, and everybody was seated around the kitchen table, except for Grandma, who'd gone off into the other room to rest. Claire had hesitantly taken a chair. At Richard's nod, Detectives Joe Hess and Travis Lowe were also present, and they were gratefully scoffing down food and drink. Claire felt exhausted, but they looked a whole lot worse. Tall, thin Joe Hess had his left arm in a sling, broken, apparently, from the brace on it, and both he and his rounder, heavier partner had cuts and bruises to prove they'd been in a fight or two. "So," Hess said, "any word on where the vampires are heading when they take off?" "Not so far," Richard said. "Once we started tracking them, we could keep up only for a while, and then they lost us." "Aren't they hurt by the sun?" Claire asked. "I mean, they start smoking. Not in the Marlboro way. And then they start crisping." Travis Lowe said around a mouthful of turkey and Swiss. "The older ones, they can handle it okay. And anyway, they're not just charging out there anymore. They're putting on hats and coats and blankets. I saw one wrapped up in a SpongeBob rug from some kid's bedroom. If you can believe that. It's the young vampires that are in trouble. Some of them won't make it into the shade if they're not careful." Claire thought about Michael, and her stomach lurched before she even formed the question. Richard saw her expression and shook his head. "Michael's okay," he said. "I saw to it myself. He's got himself a nice, secure jail cell, along with the other vampires we could catch before it was too late. He's not as strong as some of the others. He can't bend steel with his bare hands. Yet, anyway." "Any word on—" Claire was wearing out the question, and Richard didn't even let her finish. "No sign of Eve," he said. "No word from her. I tried to put a GPS track on her phone, but we'd have to bring the cell network up, and that's too dangerous right now. I've asked the guys on the street to keep an eye out for her, but we've got a lot of things going on, Claire." "I know, but..." She couldn't put it into words exactly. She just knew that somewhere, somehow, Eve was in trouble, and they needed to find her. "So," Joe Hess said, and stood up to look at the blown-up map of Morganville taped to the wall. "They're still accurate?" The map was covered in coloured dots, blue for locations held by those loyal to Amelie, red for those loyal to Bishop, black for those burnt or otherwise put out of commission, which accounted for 3 founder houses, the hospital and the blood bank. "Pretty much," Richard said. "We don't know if the vampires are leaving Bishop's locations, but we know they're digging in. Just like Amelie's folks, we can verify locations only where Amelie's people were supposed to be, and they're gone from just about every location we've got up in blue." "Where were they last seen?" Richard consulted notes and began to add yellow dots to the map. Claire saw the pattern almost immediately. "It's the portals," she said. Merlin got the portals working again. Somehow. That's what they're using. Hess and Lowe looked blank, but Richard nodded. Yeah, I know about that. Makes sense. But where are they going? She shrugged helplessly. Could be anywhere. I don't know the places the portals go. Maybe Merlin and Amelie do, but I don't think anybody else does. But she felt unreasonably cheered by the idea that vampires went out wandering out in the daylight, spontaneously combusting all over the place. She didn't want to see that happen to them. Not even to Oliver. Well, maybe to Oliver. Sometimes. But not today. The three men stared at her for a few seconds. They went back to studying the map, talking about perimeters and strategies for patrols, all kinds of things that Claire didn't figure really involved her. She finished her sandwich and walked into the living room where tiny, wizened little Grandma Day was sitting in an overstuffed wing chair by her feet, with her feet up, talking to Hannah. Hey, little girl, Grandma Day said. Sit yourself. Claire perched, looking around the room. Most of the vampires were gone, either confined to cell or locked away for safety. Some they hadn't been able to stop. She couldn't seem to stop anxiously rubbing her hands together. Shane. Shane was supposed to be here. Richard Morel had said that they'd arranged for the Bloodmobile to switch drivers, and that meant Shane would be coming soon for his rest period. She needed him right now. Grandma Day was looking at her with distant sympathy in her faded eyes. You worried? She asked, and smiled. You got cause, I expect. I do? Claire was surprised. Most adults tried to pretend it was all going to be okay. Sure thing, sugar. Morganville's been ruled by the vampires a long time, and they aren't always been the gentle of folks. Been people hurt, people killed without reason. Builds up some resentment. Grandma nodded towards the bookcase. Fetch me that red book right there. The one that starts with N. It was an encyclopedia. Claire got it and set it in her lap. Grandma's withered, sinewy fingers opened it and flipped pages, then handed it back. The heading said, New York Draft Riots, 1863. The picture showed chaos, mobs, buildings on fire, and worse things, much, much worse. People forgot, Grandma said. They forget what can happen if anger builds up. Those New York folks, they were angry because their men were being drafted to fight the Civil War. Who you think they took it out on? Mostly black folks, of all things. Folks who couldn't fight back. They even burnt up an orphanage, and they'd have killed every one of those children if they'd caught them. She shook her head, clicking her tongue in disgust. Same thing happened in Tulsa in 1921. Called it the Greenwood Riot. The black folks were taking away their business and jobs. Back in France, they had a revolution where they took all those fancy aristocrat folks and cut their heads off. Maybe it was their fault, maybe not. It's all the same thing. You get angry, you blame it on some folks, and you make them pay, guilty or not. Happens all the time. Claire felt a chill. What do you mean? I mean, you think about France, girl. Vampires been holding us all down for a long time, just like those aristocrats. Well, that's how people around here think of it. Now, you think about all those folks out there with generations of grudges, and nobody really in charge right now. You think it won't go bad on us? There weren't enough shudders in the world. Claire remembered Shane's father, the fanatical light in his eyes. He'd be one of those leading a riot, she thought. One of those pulling people out of their houses as collaborators and turncoats and hanging them up from lampposts. Hannah patted the shotgun in her lap. She'd put the paintball gun aside. Honestly, it wasn't much use now, with the vampires missing in action. They're not getting in here, Grandma. We won't be having any Greenwood in Morganville. I ain't so much worried about you and me, Grandma said. But I'd be worried for the Morels. They're going to be coming for them, sooner or later. That family's the poster children for the old guard. Claire wondered if Richard knew that. She thought about Monica too. Not that she liked Monica. God, no. But still. She thanked Grandma Day and walked back into the kitchen, where the policemen were still talking. Grandma Day thinks there's going to be trouble, she said. Not the vampires. Regular people. Like those people in the park. Maybe Lisa Day, too. And she thinks you ought to look after your family, Richard. Richard nodded. Already done, he said. My mum and dad are at City Hall. Monica's headed there, too. He paused, thinking about it. You're right. I should make sure she gets there, all right, before she becomes another statistic. His face had tightened, and there was a look in his eyes that didn't match the way he said it. He was worried. Given what Claire had just heard from Grandma Day, she thought he probably ought to be. Joe Hess and Travis Lowe sent each other looks too, and she thought they were probably thinking the same thing. She deserves it, Claire told herself. Whatever happens to Monica Morell, she earned it. Except the pictures from Grandma Day's book kept coming back to haunt her. The front door banged shut, and she heard Hannah's voice. Not an alarm, just a welcome. She spun around and went to the door into the kitchen, and ran directly into Shane, who grabbed her and folded his arms around her. You're here. Oh, wrong voice. You're here, he said, and hugged her so tightly that she felt ribs creak. Man, you don't make it easy, Claire. I've been freaking out all damn day. First I hear you're off in the middle of Vamp Town, then you're running around like bait with Eve. You're the one to talk about bait, Claire said, and pushed back to look up into his eyes. You okay? Not a scratch, he said, and grinned. Ironic, because I'm usually one of the battle scars, right? The worst thing that happened to me was that I had to pull over and let a bunch of vampires off the bus, but they had ripped right through the walls. Be proud. I even let them off into the shade. His smile faded, but not the warmth in his eyes. You look tired. Yeah, you think? She got herself on a yawn. Sorry. We should get you home and catch some rest while you can. He looked her out. Fuck you, Buck. Make me yawn. Where's Eve? Nobody had told him. Claire opened her mouth and found her throat clenching tight around the words, her eyes filled with tears. She's gone. She wanted to say, she's missing, nobody knows where she is. But saying it out loud, saying it to Shane, that would make it real. Somehow. Hey, he said, and smoothed her hair. Hey, what's wrong? Where is she? She was at Common Grounds, Claire finally choked out. His hands went still, and his eyes widened. She's missing, Claire finally said, and a wave of utter misery broke over her. She's out there somewhere. That's all I know. Her car's outside. We drove it here. Claire nodded at Hannah, who had come in behind Shane and was silently watching. He acknowledged her with a glance. That was all. Okay, Shane said. Michael's safe. You're safe. I'm safe. Now we're going to find Eve. Richard Morell stirred. That's not a good idea. Shane spun on him, and the look on his face was hard enough to scare a vampire. Want to try and stop me, Dick? Richard stared at him for a moment, then turned back to the map. You want to go? Go. We've got things to do. There's a whole town of people out there to serve and protect. Eve's one girl. Yeah? Well, she's our girl. Shane said. He took Claire's hand. Let's go. Hannah leant against the wall. Mind if I call shotgun? Since you're carrying one, feel free. Outside, things were odd, quiet, but with a suppressed feeling of excitement in the air. People were still outside, talking in groups on the streets. The stores were shut down for the most part, but Claire noticed with a stir of unease that the bars were open, and so was Morganville's gun shop. Not good. The gates of the university had opened, and they were issuing some kind of passes to people to leave. Still sticking to the emergency jewel story, Claire assumed. Oh man, Shane muttered as they turned down one of the streets that led to the heart of the town and found a square. Vamp Town. There were more people here, more groups. I don't like this. There's Sal Minetti up there. He was one of my dad's drinking buddies back in the day. The cops don't like him much either, Hannah said, and pointed to the police cars ahead. They were blocking of access at the end of the street, and when Claire squinted, she could see they were all out of their cruisers and arranged in a line, ready for anything. This could turn bad any time. All they need is somebody to strike a match out there, and we're all on fire. Claire thought about Shane saying his father was coming to town, and she knew he was thinking about that too. He shook his head. We've got to figure out where Eve might be. Ideas? Maybe she left us some clues. Back at Common Grounds, we should probably start there. Common Grounds, however, was deserted, and the steel shutters were down. The front door was locked. They drove around back to the alley. Nothing was there but trash cans, and... "What the hell is that?" Shane asked. He hit the brakes and put the car in park, then jumped out and picked up something small on the ground. He got back in and showed it to Claire. It was a small white candy in the shape of a skull. Claire blinked at it, then looked down the alley. She left a trail of breath mints? Looks like. We'll have to go on foot to follow it. Hal didn't seem to like that idea much, but Shane wasn't taking votes. They parked, unlocked Eve's car in the alley behind common grounds, and began hunting for skull candies. "Over here," Hannah yelled, at the end of the alley. "Looks like she's dropping them when she makes a turn. Smart." She went this way. After that they went faster. The skull candies were in plain sight, easy to spot. Claire noticed that they were mostly in the shadows, which would have made sense if Eve was with Mernin or the other vampires. Why did she stay? Maybe she hadn't had a choice. They ran out of Candy Trail after a few blocks. It led them to an area where Claire hadn't really been before. Abandoned old buildings, mostly falling to pieces under the relentless pressure of years and sun. It looked and felt deserted. Where now? Claire asked, looking round. She didn't see anything obvious, but then she spotted something shiny, tucked in behind a tipped-over rusty trash can. She reached behind and came up with a black leather collar studded with silver spikes. The same collar Eve had been wearing. She wordlessly showed it to Shane, who turned in a slow circle looking at the blank buildings. "Come on, Eve," he said. "Give us something. Anything." He froze. "You hear that?" Hannah cocked her head. She was standing at the end of the alley, shotgun held in her arms, in a way that was both casual and scarily competent. "What?" "You don't hear it?" Claire did. Somebody's phone was ringing, a cell phone with an ultrasonic ringtone. She heard that people couldn't hear those frequencies, and kids in school had used them all the time to sneak phone calls and texts in class. It was faint, but it was definitely there. "I thought the networks were down," she said, and pulled her own phone out. Nope, the network was back up. She wondered if Richard had done it, or they'd lost control of the cell phone towers. Either one was possible. They found the phone before the ringing stopped. It was Eve's. A red phone, with Silver Skull cell phone charms on it, discarded in the shadow of a broken, leaning doorway. Who was calling? Claire asked, and Shane paged through the menu. "Richard," he said. Guess he really was looking for her after all. Claire's phone buzzed, just once. A text message. She opened it and checked. It was from Eve, and had been sent hours ago. The backlog of messages was just now being delivered, apparently. It read, 911 at Germans. Claire showed it to Shane. "What is this?" 911 emergency message. Germans. He looked over at Hannah, who pushed away from the wall and came towards them. "German's tyre plant," she said. "Damn, I don't like that. It's the size of a couple of football fields at least." "We should let Richard know," Claire said. She dialed, but the network was busy, and then the bars failed again. "I'm not waiting," Shane said. "Let's get the car." Hello everyone, thank you for listening to the audio file or audio reading I've done of a Rachel Kane book. I'm putting this in there, so if you want to skip past this bit and move on to the next video, that's fine by me. This is just like a cancer plug, because I want to do this, as well as also I have to do this, because the thing you've just listened to is illegal for me to do without having a charity case behind it, which I don't want it to be like a situation like, oh, I'm only doing this for the sake of cancer, which I'm actually doing this for the sake of cancer, but I did cancel this series a long time ago. It came to my recent attention that I should redo this in a better format, and I feel like now is a perfect opportunity to actually restart this in the worst possible way. Back in 1st of November, back in 2020, Rachel Kane sadly passed away to a rare bone cancer called sarcoma. Now, in the description below is going to be a link that you can. It's going to be a link so you can support the research into helping people survive and defeat sarcoma bone cancer and soft tissue cancer cells and all that stuff. So that's just going to be in the description right there down below. It is in pounds for those American ones, but obviously PayPal and all the research still goes to the same thing, because once it's being cured, once they found a cure for it or found an easier
solution for it and stuff like that, it does get sent around all around the world because everyone works on the same thing all over the world. It's just that this charity is based in UK. I live in the UK, so it still goes to the same goal to beat sarcoma for a long time, and I feel like this is the best opportunity to work with it for any Rachel King books that we do during the Morganville series or any future series that we do. Obviously, this is even going to be in the future series if we do them. So any book that we do by Rachel King is going to have this at the end, just to plug a little bit of a cancer support for people with sarcoma, because it is a rare cancer, and there is not a very good survival rate. So just putting that in there to help people or to support the issues that are out there, because I'm not going to get any money from these videos at all, even in like the present when I'm not getting any money of this recording, or in the future, if possibly I do. But this is not what I'm about. This is all about for what Rachel Kane succumbed to in the end. So hopefully that as a team together we can beat sarcoma and end one of the cancers that are killing people, because no one likes that. But anyway, have a good day.